Hello everyone, and welcome to today's episode as a part of the Soil and Water Conservation Virtual Field Trip Series here at the University of Arkansas Division of Agriculture. My name is Chandler Arel. I'm the Soil and Water Conservation Instructor here, stationed at the University of Arkansas Fayetteville campus. Today, we are at Prairie Grove Battlefield State Park, and I'm joined by the Superintendent of the park, Susan Donnangelo. Well, thank you for joining us today, Susan.
Well, thanks, Chandler. Yeah, like you said, my name's Susan Donnangelo, and I'm the park superintendent here at Prairie Grove Battlefield State Park. I started here in 2016. I've been with Arkansas State Parks for about 25 years. I started as a frontline park interpreter, where I was able to help our park visitors that come to various state parks learn a little bit more about the different resources we try to protect. Those might be natural, cultural, historical resources. So I have a strong passion for park interpretation. Here at Prairie Grove Battlefield State Park, I had an opportunity to come and help manage those park resources. So I was able to take my love and passion for park interpretation and park resource management and combine the two as the park superintendent. So I've been here enjoying that for the past 10 years.
Okay, great. Well, it's great to have someone so qualified and so passionate about state parks here as the superintendent. Now, specifically here at this state park, can you tell me what the historical significance is and why people come to visit this park?
We are the Prairie Grove Battlefield State Park, so we exist to preserve the history of the Battle of Prairie Grove, which occurred on December 7th of 1862, a Civil War battle in Northwest Arkansas that had a pretty significant impact on the outcome of our area of the Civil War engagements.
Yeah.
So we protect and manage this battlefield and help tell the stories of what happened here.
Okay. When was this park established?
So Prairie Grove Battlefield became a state park in 1971, and over the past 50 years, we've evolved quite a bit. Just in the past 30 years, the park has grown to over 1,000 acres.
Wow.
Our main mission is to preserve the stories of the Battle of Prairie Grove and help tell that history and how it impacted the area, how it impacted the citizens of the Northwest Arkansas region.
For a long time, this state park has been a pretty big center point in the Prairie Grove community. So it's good to know that it's visited by people, it's very visible, and that it's again an important part of the community. So with that, can you tell us about within the park some of the unique features, maybe some of the buildings? I see that there's the Prairie Grove Orchard behind us. So can you tell us about those unique features within the park that people come to see specifically?
Sure. Our center point is probably this building behind me, which is the Borden House. That's a house that stood during the Battle of Prairie Grove. It was eventually burned down the day after the battle, but was rebuilt within a few years. But this is an area where most of the heaviest fighting took place during the Battle of Prairie Grove. It was a one-day battle. The orchard behind us is the Borden Orchard, and it saw some of the heaviest casualties. Besides these two buildings, we have multiple historic buildings that were brought on site in the 50s. Whenever the commission wanted to establish this as a memorial park and a place where people could gather. So we have a museum that's called Heinemann Hall Museum that is open to the public for free. It's open Wednesday through Saturday and half a day on Sunday. And people can come in there and tour the exhibits and learn more about the Battle of Prairie Grove, Arkansas's role in the Civil War, and how that impacted our history here.
Okay. The aspect that it's free to visit is also, I think, a very important part to highlight. It's supported by Arkansas taxpayers, and so being able to visit it, I'm sure you encourage people to come visit your park and take a look at what you guys work so hard to preserve.
Some people might not realize how many people come to Prairie Grove Battlefield State Park. Being in Northwest Arkansas, in such a heavily populated area of the state, we get a lot of visitors. We are a day use only park, so I would say we get, close to 150,000 visitors a year.
Wow.
Some of that may be impacted by the special events that we have.
Yeah.
We have an annual event on Labor Day weekend. It's called the Clothesline Fair, and it attracts tens of thousands of folks over the weekend.
Wow.
Which is very popular.
Yeah.
Another big event that we have here is the battle reenactments that we do every other year.
Okay.
Which this is a battle reenactment year, so we're in the planning phases of that event. We do the battle reenactment on the anniversary weekend of the battle. Since the battle occurred in December, we do it on the first weekend of December on even numbered years.
Wow. Yeah, and I imagine that is a very involved event for both the people that attend and for your staff.
Yes,
so
sir.
that probably takes quite a bit of planning.
Yes, sir. We usually have between 500 and 700 reenactors, and then
Wow.
thousands of visitors come to tour the camps and attend the programs and watch the reenactment itself.
Wow. Yeah, that's great to know. I live in Farmington, just on the road, and I was unaware. So I think I'll have to check that out this December and see what it's all about. A lot of people come to visit, and that can strain, park resources. There's this new collaboration between the park and the Illinois River Watershed Partnership to do some ecological restoration within the park, especially because the Illinois River runs through the park.
Mm-hmm.
So could you tell me, from the state park side, you and your staff, what kind of role are you guys playing in that restoration effort?
Great question. So we recently partnered with the Illinois River Watershed Partnership on this ecological restoration. And what a lot of people may not also realize is that we have a really small staff.
Oh.
And we actively manage around 200 to 300 of the 1,000 acres of the park.
Okay.
The rest of the properties are managed through partnerships we have that we call our pasture partners and our hay harvesting partners. And we've had a long relationship. It's been really great, and it's helped us manage the majority of the park lands. As we work with the Illinois River Watershed Partners, we feel like it's time for the state park to take on a more active preservation and restoration effort of taking those lands and bringing it back to more of a historical landscape.
Okay.
When you think about Civil War artifacts, a lot of times you think about the cannonballs and you think about the bullets you find or the uniforms and the different things you might find on the grounds.
Mm-hmm.
But our biggest artifact is the landscape.
Yeah.
And so for us to be able to share that landscape with more people by allowing access, to me, is going to be tremendous. And so working with the Illinois River Watershed Partnership and their experts will give us a greater ability to provide that access for the public and our visitors, and help people have a better understanding of what this battle was about and how that history impacted Prairie Grove back then and today.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I know a little bit about the conservation plan that'll be implemented, and I certainly agree that having that return to its ecologic history and kind of the vegetation in the area and bringing that landscape back to what it was, I think will be a huge benefit to the visitors of the park. So I'm very excited to see how that changes. And I'm sure that the people that visit will be very excited to see the park is not only being preserved, but actually being restored to how it once was. The last question I have for you is just, from the superintendent perspective of a state park, do you have anything to say to people that maybe don't visit state parks very often, or they don't take a lot of time, or maybe they haven't historically taken a lot of time to come visit parks, get out, walk these trails? Maybe I've seen people walking their dogs around the park. What do you have to say to people to encourage them to get out in their community, visit parks like this?
I think the best way to put it is, these are your state parks. Your taxpayers help support what we do in our Arkansas state parks. I grew up here in Arkansas, and I spent a lot of time growing up going to my local state parks. There is a state park within an hour's drive of every Arkansan, and they are free for you to experience, free for you to learn more about your heritage, the culture, the natural resources, and all that is preserved for your future and the generations that come after us.
Yeah, I certainly agree. I enjoy visiting state parks. I've visited many across the state of Arkansas. So I would encourage our audience to definitely get out there wherever you're watching this from, even if it's not in Arkansas, whatever state you're in that has state parks, go out, visit them. You're paying for these state parks as a taxpayer. So participate in your community, go out, see these parks, learn about them. It is a fantastic opportunity to be a part of your community. So Susan, I want to thank you for being a part of this virtual field trip today. It's been great hearing about the park, what the park has to offer, and how it's involved in the local community. Up next, we're going to hear about the actual restoration project in the park, partnered with that Illinois River Watershed Partnership. So we'll turn that over to the Illinois River Watershed Partnership and hear what they have to say about the restoration plan. I'm joined today by Annie Sales from the Illinois River Watershed Partnership. She's part of the project here that's aiming to restore some of the degraded areas within the park. So Annie, thank you for joining us. I'd like to start this portion of our virtual field trip today by having you just introduce yourself and talk about what your role is at the IRWP.
Great. My name is Annie Sales. I'm the Director of Restoration Services for the Illinois River Watershed Partnership.
Great. What is the IRWP and what is its functions as an organization?
So the Illinois River Watershed Partnership is a 20-year-old nonprofit whose mission is to improve the integrity of the Illinois River watershed through education, outreach, and implementation of conservation and restoration practices.
You guys not only, do the science of it all, but you guys are hands-on, doing a lot of this restoration yourself. So that's great to hear. Can you tell me just generally, what is a watershed? Why should people be concerned about what's going into their water in a watershed? And talk to me a little bit about the specifics of the Illinois River watershed itself.
So a watershed is basically a total land area that drains to a single water body. The Illinois River watershed is about 1 million acres.
Wow.
And it starts down in Hawkeye, moves to Prairie Grove, all the way up Fayetteville, Springdale, Rogers, Bentonville, and then cuts west all the way into Oklahoma. It's about half in Oklahoma, half in Arkansas.
Okay.
And the Illinois River itself drains all the way down and empties into Lake Tenkiller before meeting up with the Arkansas River. And so anything that happens on the surface in that total 1 million acres eventually ends up into the Illinois River and ultimately down to Lake Tenkiller, which is the drinking water source for the city of Tahlequah.
Okay, yeah, so it's certainly, it's very impactful to the local communities within that watershed. A lot of people are very concerned about the quality of their drinking water, of course, because it's what you're putting into your body. It affects your health. So definitely, and of course, why we're here at the state park is the Illinois River, of course, runs through this state park, correct? And some of its tributaries.
Yeah, it sure does. So you can see behind me, all the way in that far corner, there's the main stem of the upper Illinois River.
Okay.
So we are in the heart of the Illinois River watershed here at the Battlefield State Park.
It's a very large scope, very large area for a watershed, but can you give me some background on how the IRWP got involved, specifically within the state park, and who is involved in this restoration of the state park?
I used to live here in Prairie Grove, and I've been a volunteer here at the park for about 5 years now. And this project really came about as just a dream between Susan, park superintendent, and myself. They have slowly been acquiring all of these fields behind us. It started as about 200 acres, and they've grown now. They have about 1,000 acres of parkland here.
Wow.
Some of it is still in a life estate. So there's about 800 acres that is part of the park currently, and the rest will be deeded to the park as soon as that family moves on. So we have this whole park, but it's still being managed in very traditional ways. It's leased for cattle production, hay harvesting.
Okay.
And Susan and I just dreamt of what it could be like if it was restored to its natural setting, and it could provide more than just a historical park, but a nature park, an environmental asset to the community.
Yeah.
So it started as just a dream, and then there's a whole coalition of nonprofits and municipalities that worked together to apply for a grant from the EPA. So Northwest Arkansas Regional Planning and Metro Plan out of Little Rock really led that initiative. And they were calling for projects for people all over the state, Little Rock, Fort Smith, and Northwest Arkansas. And we saw it as a great opportunity. So that funding source is the EPA's Climate Pollution Reduction Grant, CPRG. And they were looking for projects like this, projects that could restore land to get carbon back into the soil, out of the atmosphere, and provide that climate resilience.
Okay.
So we applied collectively. There's about 30 projects, I think, in the region that all pulled projects together and applied collectively for this funding. And we were awarded. And it was a surprise, I think, to all of us. But we were so grateful. And now we get to see it come to life.
Yeah.
So we have so many partners in this project. We really are trying to partner with basically everyone in the habitat ecological restoration business.
Yeah.
Game and Fish, Forest Service, Quail Forever, the soil conservation districts,
Yeah.
the university, state parks, obviously, Natural Heritage Commission, the U.S. Archaeological Society or State Archaeological Society, because this is a historic park.
Yeah.
Where we have the River Cane Initiative supporting us on our River Cane stands.
Yeah.
And then obviously the communities around here as well.
Oh yeah, and I think in science we see that these are most effective when it's a wide net of stakeholders, from the state level, the local level. I think that's really how you get people invested. So it's good to hear that it's a wide group of people that are interested from all different, sectors of industry, whether it's academia, transportation, it's really great to hear that there's so many people involved. So we heard previously from the park superintendent about, what's kind of in the park for tourism, but could you walk me through ecologically in the park? What kind of ecosystems do we see within the park, including the different water bodies in the park, the different ecosystems, and what the land uses kind of are within the park?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can see behind me, this whole park is kind of a valley. So the park goes all the way to basically where those structures are on the ridge.
Okay.
You can imagine the bottom of this valley would have historically been prairie, tall grass prairie, starting a little bit higher in elevation, upland prairie, all the way down to the river that's more low, wet prairie.
Okay.
And then as you move up those hillsides, you would kind of get that feathering into savanna and then woodland on the top of those hillsides.
Yeah.
These very fertile prairie soils were probably why people started to settle here in Prairie Grove to begin with, and those were quickly converted to agricultural lands.
Yeah.
We imagine there would have been row cropping out here to start with, but now it's mostly cattle being grazed for cattle and cut for hay. There are many springs on the property. We've identified at least 3. There are wetlands and some seeps coming up all over this kind of valley floor. There's one small tributary that runs east to west across the park and meets up with the Illinois River main stem back in the corner. And then there are multiple spring runs where all of those springs are coming out of the ground. So the whole valley is really wet.
Yeah.
You can see the prairie mounds behind me in this area that's kind of a remnant prairie. And then as you get closer to the bottom, it's very wet after rains, lots of water.
Yeah, it sounds like a very diverse area when it comes to the different ecosystems that exist. Protecting those ecosystems is very valuable. So this restoration effort sounds like it's going to do a lot to try to bring those ecosystems back. You talked about a lot of water in the soils in this area. Soil does a lot to improve water quality before it enters into the Illinois River. I think there will be a lot of positive effects ecologically for this restoration. With those land changes that have occurred, can you talk a little about the specifics about natural resource concerns in the park that have been generated from those changes in land use?
We all rely on agriculture. It's really pretty much the backbone of not only our economy in Arkansas, but our culture, our heritage.
Yeah.
So, but with that comes we can kind of love a land to death, so to speak.
Yeah.
Where we are over extracting, not letting vegetation grow really high. So we're not getting that replenishment of organic matter in the soil.
Yeah.
We're just kind of extracting all of those organics. We would imagine that there would have been historical fertilizer application in the way of poultry litter or chemical fertilizer. And so we do see elevated levels of phosphorus and nitrogen while also seeing really low organic matter. And with that, we have very mobile soils. They're easily eroded. This field, you can see there's vegetation standing. This is really close to the park main area, and they're not harvesting it as much. But out in the cattle pastures and in some of the hay fields, you're seeing very little vegetation, a lot of bare soils that are heavily compacted just from heavy equipment and cattle on them. And with that, we're seeing higher rates of runoff. runoff that's carrying pathogens, but also just nutrients, excess nutrients and sediment from just the soil eroding.
Yeah.
We're also seeing incision on all of those waterways because we don't really have vegetation on either side and those riparian buffers to hold those banks in place.
Yeah.
They're being trampled by livestock. They're being run over by equipment. And so we're seeing this incision in the streams, very murky water in a lot of cases. We, as part of, this was a really wet valley originally, and to make it more suitable for agriculture, you see a lot of ditching of wetlands. Wetlands act as the kidneys of our waterways.
Absolutely.
They're really using that soil to filter that water.
Yeah.
And we're not getting as much of that, so we're getting just more water that's being channeled straight into the Illinois. We're seeing invasive pressure in our woodlands. We don't have those open woodlands that we would have had historically. It's a very dense understory of honeysuckle and privet. And plant communities have shifted over time to species that can tolerate the repeated grazing, intense grazing and harvesting. So we're losing some of our prairie species, particularly our forbs, our big bluestem and things like that. And it's shifting to more of those Johnson grass, fescue, Bermuda grasses that can handle that intense pressure of grazing and hay harvesting. With that, we're also seeing just less wildlife, less insects, pollinators, less birds. We can imagine this would have been full of quail at one point and other prairie birds.
Of course, I mean, yes, of course, over time, you know, those native grass species and all the different vegetation in the park, those, you know, the wildlife evolved with them to live in these areas. And so when those disappear, it can be really devastating to those wildlife populations. It sounds like reestablishing those native grasses like little and big bluestem away from things like Johnson grass or Bermuda grass could have very positive impacts, you know, not just for things like soil and water, but bringing back wildlife populations that are not as present in this area as they once were. You know, we talked about not only that water in the Illinois River is a drinking water source, but do people interact with that water in other ways?
Oh, absolutely. People love the Illinois River. We float the river, swim in the river, fish in the river.
Yeah.
It's an incredible resource for the community in terms of recreation and part of our sense of culture, sense of place.
Yeah. Turning away from just the problems that we're seeing, let's turn and talk about solutions. So with those natural resource concerns being a problem and you're implementing this restoration effort, can you tell me the kind of solutions that you guys are planning to put into place to try to alleviate these problems?
Yeah, that's the fun part. So we hope to restore this whole valley back to tallgrass prairie.
Okay.
We have the historical land survey maps that map out about 560 acres of this park as historic prairie. So pretty much everything in the valley.
Yeah.
So we hope to transition it back. So we'll have this is the last year for grazing and hay harvesting, and then we'll implement prescribed fire and really just watch it and see what comes back on its own. We're pretty hopeful that there is a robust seedbed, historic prairie seedbed underneath all of these soils. But then we'll implement other practices as needed to manage invasive species, reseed where we need to, hopefully with as local ecotype seed as possible.
Yeah.
And then we're gonna do invasive management in the woodlands, thin out a lot of these overgrown woodlands, bring back savanna in the hillsides. And we also have these historic cane breaks that would have covered acres of this valley, and we hope to encourage those to come back. And what that really is going to do, these prairie grasses and wildflowers, forbs, can grow roots 10, 15, 20 feet down into the soil. And those are going to help break up that compacted soil, allow water to infiltrate into the soil so there's less runoff moving through. I know everyone downstream is going to be grateful for less flooding impacts, that flashiness of the river. It's also going to help cycle some of those legacy nutrients in the soil, work through some of that phosphorus and nitrogen, while also providing habitat and all of those other wonderful things. this is such an incredible community resource, and we want everyone to feel involved in this restoration as part of this community. This is for everyone. It's not just for a few of us. So we plan to involve the community in many ways, particularly with volunteer events, invasive removals, plantings, litter cleanups, seed harvesting. We'd love to invite the community to come out and harvest seed that they can take back to their own land and their spaces that they steward. This park actually butts up to Prairie Grove School District. They've got a whole campus, and so students can walk to this park on the other side. So we hope to build a space that the school can use as an outdoor classroom where teachers can just, anytime it's nice outside, they can come out and just be in the park. But we also want to include them in the restoration efforts in terms of invasive management and planting. But I would love to create special places that they can take total stewardship of, where classes know, like, I can always go there and pull invasives, or I can go there and monitor, just see what's out there and report back to the IRWP. What do they find? Use their iNaturalist app and just record species so that they can help inform the restoration and the monitoring of that. We're also going to do extensive research out here, soil research, but also water quality monitoring. And we would love to get volunteers involved in helping us collect samples and kind of keep an eye on the water quality here at the park. But mostly we want people to enjoy it. So we plan on cutting paths, just mowed paths throughout the whole 800 acres eventually, so that people can actually just get out there and get involved. We want to do repeat photo stands throughout that'll be semi-permanent, so people can just put their phone on a stand and take a picture anytime they're there, and then upload it to a database where we can have this tracking of the landscape visually over time. And then of course we'll have lots of interpretive signage and ways that people can learn as they're moving through the landscape.
Yeah, I think that sounds great, and I'm certain that those high school students will be happy to be able to get their new hours that they need to graduate through some civic volunteering in an area as beautiful as this, instead of maybe some other opportunities that they would be afforded. So I think that'll be a great way to get the Prairie Grove community involved. So I want to thank you for being a part of this virtual field trip and talking to our audience about, how they can get involved, the restoration efforts that are ongoing in the park. Up next, we'll be hearing from Dr. Kristofor Brye about the soil sampling efforts ongoing in the park. Hello everyone, and welcome to the portion of this virtual field trip where we're going to be talking about the soil sampling effort taking place in Prairie Grove Battlefield State Park. I'm joined by Dr. Kristofor Brye, University Professor of Applied Soil Physics and Pedology at the University of Arkansas. So I want to thank you, Dr. Brye, for being a part of this virtual field trip.
Sure, thanks Chandler. I appreciate the opportunity. My name is Chris Brye. I am a professor of soil physics and pedology at the university in the Department of Crop, Soil, and Environmental Sciences. So I'm a soil scientist, sort of a generalist, prairie enthusiast. That's part of the reason why we're out here at the Prairie Grove Battlefield Park this afternoon, and hopefully we'll be here for the next several years doing some work. I teach and do a variety of different types of research activities with the university, and this is a fun opportunity to get out in the field.
Fantastic. So to dive into the details of what we're doing in the park today, could you explain the soil sampling effort that's going on and what analysis of that soil sample might take place into the future?
Well, my role here and what we're doing today particularly is we're out here trying to gather some soils information. We've got, my team has imposed a rather large scale grid approach on these several hundred acres. There's about 500 feet between each point, and there's about 140 points that we've started at this morning and are going to try to knock out and finish sampling before the day is over. we are collecting information from the 0 to 10 centimeters and then the 10 to 20 centimeters with some detailed soil core chamber sample collection. And then our plan is to come back in the next day or two, and we have some strategically chosen points in that grid where we're going to try to go to a meter deep if we can in 20 centimeter intervals. Okay. So we want to get some of this deep information. We want to focus on the top, and we want to understand just what the soil property distribution is out here throughout this entire current several hundred acres. And then we do want to track in the future. This isn't one of those things where we come back in just a year or two, maybe 3 years at a minimum, 5, once some restoration activities have been decided upon, implemented, consistently implemented for several years, if that's what it takes, and then come back and see if we have positively changed some of the soil properties, namely carbon.
Yeah.
So soil carbon sequestration, certainly at the surface and with depth, is one of the main goals that we want to be able to track. And so we need a very good foundational set of soil samples that are out here. It'd be great if we could do it, do even more, but this is kind of between the area that we're talking about and what's practical to accomplish.
Yeah.
We've settled on in the neighborhood of about 140 samples, sample points. And then we're going to be able to map this entire area with the various soil properties. We're going to do soil texture. We're going to do bulk density, total carbon, total nitrogen. We're going to look at soil pH, electrical conductivity, extractable soil nutrients, anywhere from phosphorus, calcium, magnesium, all the way to iron and copper and boron, and several in between. We want to really understand and do a full characterization of what's out here so that maybe that information can help dictate where certain restoration practices would be most practical.
Yeah.
And we target those areas.
Absolutely.
And equally important is maybe there's some areas that we should avoid for a particular practice.
Yeah.
They'd be better suited elsewhere.
Is there anything particularly valuable about prairie soils, you know, in the Ozark Highlands generally because they're prairie soils? Are they rare at this point? What makes the restoration of this area worthy of being done?
Well, the Ozark Highlands in general was kind of a mix. You see some forested areas around.
Yeah.
You see grassland. So it's sort of this oak savanna type of climax vegetative community. There are other areas where there were vaster expanses of prairie and still other areas yet where they're mostly forest. But then we got this area that's kind of the in-between. And so this is not new at all to the Ozark Highlands, Northwest Arkansas. This is what this landscape looked like several hundred years ago. So it belongs here.
Yeah.
And with urbanization and just the expansion of agricultural operations, those are important. But when there's an opportunity to take a large tract of land, that doesn't come along very often.
Yeah.
And this is a really unique setting and an opportunity to have this several hundred acre area of contiguous property rather than bits and pieces scattered out the landscape across the whole county. We have this all right here. So there can really be some targeted efforts. There's lots of ecosystem services that native prairies, grasslands, and forests provide. And here they're all kind of commingled together, which really is great for wildlife. There's lots of different bird species, umpteen number of smaller animals that use this type of landscape for habitat, for breeding grounds.
Yeah.
Just their daily life cycle. And so we need to be able to have a foundational understanding of what's going on below ground.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Before we can have an idea of what might be practical to achieve and what can have success in the future.
Yeah.
We certainly don't want to target some restoration practice in an area that it's doomed to fail.
Yeah.
And so that's why this baseline set of soil sampling is going to be extremely informative, not only for the restoration activities here in the next couple of years, for years on down the line, decades, hopefully, if all goes well.
Yeah.
But then that just opens the door for a tremendous opportunity to do other research. The superintendent told me herself just a little while ago that she wants to make this as much of an outdoor classroom as can be, from the natural resources that they have here. I think that would be a tremendous goal to work towards.
Yeah.
And to be able to demonstrate some of the successes. And the realm that I work in, people don't see what goes on below ground, hardly ever.
Yeah.
And so we got to get it right below ground, understand what's going on in the soil before we can get the above ground right, make it look the way it should, make it function. That's even more important than how it looks aesthetically, make it function the way it should.
Yeah, absolutely. The last thing I'll ask you about before we turn you loose for the day, a lot of conversation, especially with the IRWP and with the superintendent today, has been about partners in this effort, about collaboration, not only with those interested in funding and doing the work, but also with community partners being involved. The IRWP will be involving high school students from Prairie Grove High School. And so, from a scientific aspect, what kind of value do you see in involving, stakeholders from the federal, the state, the local, regional? Do you think that has an impact on making restoration efforts like this more successful? What's your kind of perspective on that?
Well, I think the scientific and research value will come from educating all of those groups. As a nonprofit organization, IRWP is, they're bringing people together, building communities, building relationships, getting local people involved, so they're hands-on.
Yeah.
They see it, and then they have an understanding of why is it that way if they've been able to participate in something as basic as spend a couple of hours out soil sampling. We've had some volunteers today, both from the university and IRWP. So the educational aspect to this gets more people to understand the value of having these types of ecosystems in our landscape. It's hard to miss the fact that this is on a major highway. This is very visible.
Yeah, absolutely.
This park is quite visible. They get lots of visitors, not only from the state, the region, states away.
Over 100,000 a year.
Come here, 100,000 people a year. So that's a lot of eyes. That's a lot of people to help gain some understanding. Can't hurt if somebody's willing to donate to some of these efforts. So it could be financially beneficial. But this is what this landscape looked like. And we haven't even touched on the historical significance of what went on here back in the Civil War days. And just what happened in this landscape to actually have a battle and then to be able to restore it back to hopefully get close. We'll likely never achieve full restoration. It will be a decade-long, multi-decade-long process. But hopefully what we're doing is laying the foundation now. So lots of groups, whether it's high school, it's junior high, it's lab classes with the university, come out here and use this as an outdoor classroom. I'm hoping that this is able to snowball into some more research opportunities. The number of opportunities to study out here and really do some detailed work with the different restoration activities, the topography out here. We've got the summit, the hillsides, we've got the valley down here. We've got a lot of different materials, soil materials, a lot of variability right here in close proximity. It's a tremendous opportunity for science and research after we are able to accomplish some of the education.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there is a lot to look forward to in this project. And so, I hope that everything is effective and the restoration goes well. But with that, I want to thank you for your time, for being a part of this virtual field trip. And I will go ahead and turn it back to you all in the studio. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today to learn about our project at Prairie Grove Battlefield State Park. I'm your host, Chandler Arel, And today I'm joined by the same experts that you just heard from in today's video. That's Park Superintendent Susan Donnangelo, the IRWP's Annie Sales, and Dr. Chris Brye from the University of Arkansas. So first, I want to thank you all for joining us today to serve as our expert panel. Now to the audience, today's session is designed to be as interactive as possible. So we've set aside time for a live question and answer session with our expert panel, where you, the audience, can type your questions into the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. We've already received some questions during the video today. So without any further ado, we'll go ahead and go straight into the live Q&A and see what questions you all had. So let's see. So let's start with this first one that we had come in from an audience member. And I think this is best suited for you, Susan. The question is, how can high school students, and Annie, if you feel like answering this as well, please feel free to jump in. But how can high school students sign up to volunteer at the park? We talked about in the video, there's kind of a civic engagement requirement for high school students in Arkansas these days. So how can those students eventually sign up to volunteer?
What a great question. And I love that we're leading with that, because one of the goals of this project is to get our students involved. And so one way that those students can get involved and get those hours they need for their community service for their graduation, they can come to the park and we can sign off on those hours of community service. They can also get with the Illinois River Watershed Partnership and get some hours signed off through them. But all they have to do is come by the state park and visit with staff here, and we can get them going.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'm sure that a lot of students enjoy opportunities where they actually get to go outside and do something hands-on. So I think this will probably get a lot of attention from all of the students that need those volunteer hours. So I think that'll be really great. Let's see. A second question that we got, and maybe this one is best suited for you, Annie, and Dr. Brye, you as well. You can chime in if you would like. But Donna Galtney asked, could we get a specific example of a restoration practice that would contribute to improving the soil properties in the park?
Yeah, the easiest one is just to grow native plants. So I talked about it a little bit in the video, but native plants are extremely deep rooted. So they're able to go down and kind of break up that compacted soil, and they leave all of these little pathways for water to infiltrate, but they also create a habitat for microbes, for bacteria and fungus to come into the soil that's going to help cycle nutrients, that's going to make all of that phosphorus and nitrogen that's in the soil available for plants to use and cycle it through the ecosystem. So really just that basic thing, just letting native plants grow, is really one of the greatest ways that you can improve soil quality from my perspective. And I'll let the expert, Dr. Brye, jump in.
Well, thanks, Annie. I think from a restoration practice standpoint, shifting from the managed grazed pasture land setting will require removal of some of those pasture grasses, whether that's going to be with some chemical termination and letting, as Annie alluded to in the video, letting the natural seed bank just do its thing, and getting some of those bunch grasses to then start poking through compacted layers. That is going to just allow the cascade of literal water entering the soil, translocating nutrients, improving nutrient cycling, getting those roots deeper, and those roots are full of carbon. And that's part of this whole climate change mitigation goal that EPA has, is let's get CO2 out of the atmosphere and get it in the ground, and allowing these grasses to proliferate, spread naturally first, and then with some help, if we've got to fill in the blanks with some targeted seeding and other practices, just let those plants do what they're supposed to do naturally. So we're really hopeful that with our baseline sampling, we know what's out there to begin with, and it's not necessarily in a bad place. but we want to be able to track what some of these restoration activities are going to be able to do. And we fully anticipate identifying some practices that are going to have larger impacts in a positive way on soil properties than others. And that's important information to know.
Yeah, yeah, I think absolutely. It sounds that kind of shift from managed to natural is seemingly consensus between you two that that's where this needs to be headed to be as effective. And that kind of perfectly goes into a third question that we have from an audience member. And Annie, I'll send this your way, and Susan, feel free to chime in on this as well. But they asked, I'm curious about removing grazing from the park. Were there conversations about implementing more sustainable grazing practices rather than removing the cattle entirely?
For this particular project, the goal for the funder for EPA was to sequester as much carbon as possible. And that really comes with reintroducing these prairie species or allowing the prairie to regenerate on its own. That is really our best way to get atmospheric carbon back into the soil. So in this particular project, we were not necessarily looking for a transition to regenerative agriculture. Although in other projects, IRWP completely supports regenerative agriculture. We need a shift in that agriculture ethic in the region. We love our producers, we support our producers, and we understand that they're the backbone of this region. But for this project on public land that we want to open up to the public as a park, that was not in our goals for this project.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and I'll chime in. As an Arkansas State Park, one of our goals is to make access to these resources for the visitors that come here, and having that cattle out on that landscape prevents that from happening. So it's a balance of providing access or allowing that grazing. Will there be possibly the opportunity in the future? Perhaps. This is a very early stages of the project, and so I'm curious to see how some of these restoration efforts and implementations impact the decisions as we move forward. But right now, that's not something we're looking towards.
Yeah, yeah, and it sounds like, by no means is this project saying, grazing is bad or we don't want our producers. It's just, with its immediate kind of proximity maybe to the Illinois River, and that also the complexity of it being a state park. And the objectives of this project definitely kind of guide it towards maybe for the moment, yeah, the grazing is maybe not what we want on that property. So let's see, another question that we got, and this this is definitely targeted for you, Dr. Brye. We got someone asking about soil types in the park, specifically if there are any identified mollisols in the park.
Yeah, thanks for that question. This brings up a little bit of a unique issue. We do have access to what had historically been county-wide soil survey reports. And now with the advancement of technology, we have the soil survey in the form of the web soil survey. We have iPhone, Android phone apps, tablet apps that you can walk out on a landscape and press a button, and you have access to those soil survey maps. However, what people don't realize is those are not meant to be site specific, right down to the feet where you're standing at that time. The soil survey was created for different purposes, a much larger scale land use. So you got to be a little bit careful about looking at a soil map, soil survey, electronic database like that. So prior to doing our soil sampling scheme out there that we talked about in the video, we certainly did our reconnaissance about what was mapped throughout the several hundred acres to nearly 1,000 acres of area out there. So we had an idea of what to expect when we went out there. But certainly we found variations, which was not out of the ordinary. So as Annie alluded to, the valley out there, even with the east-west trending tributary, there are floodplain soils, there are toe slope soils that have received sediments from upslope erosion washing downhill, sediments that have come out of flooding from the stream that are rich in nutrients, that have increased the topsoil thickness, for lack of a better way to describe it. So yeah, we did encounter mollisols out there. Mollisols are characteristic prairie soils. We don't have a lot of them in Arkansas. We're a really warm and humid climate, and that organic matter that creates the deep, dark mollisol topsoil portion tends to decompose quickly. So there are scattered, isolated areas that are certainly exist at the park there that have lots of carbon in them to begin with. And those will certainly likely receive different treatment than other more upland areas that are less abundant and more depleted with organic matter, carbon, and nutrients. So the soils that are out there, there's a wide range of them for sure. And we need to know about those properties so we can target certain restoration practices for certain areas.
Yeah, that's great. And that certainly, the last part that you said there feeds into another question that we got about kind of precision planting, kind of tailoring the goals of planting throughout the park with what we know about the soil. So I guess for you, Annie, one of the audience members asked, would you plant different plant species depending on what you know about the soil nutrients throughout the park? Namely, maybe phosphorus, for example, was what the audience member specifically asked about.
What we have found interesting in other projects and having conversations with restoration practitioners is that soils that are high in phosphorus are more suitable for a lot of our invasive species. So it becomes more of a challenge with these soils that have high nutrients. So soils with high nitrogen and phosphorus, Johnson grass, Bermuda, honeysuckle, these exotics love those nutrients. Where our native prairie species, they kind of prefer a leaner soil, one that's kind of lower in those nutrients. So it becomes a challenge with these soils that have kind of elevated levels of phosphorus from legacy fertilizer applications, to, in some ways, some practitioners are kind of farming out that phosphorus. So we see some people in other parts that are like actively like growing crops on these soils to extract out some of those nutrients and then following with seeding with natives or allowing that prairie restoration. And I don't think we're necessarily going to do that, but we might see the impacts of that. And having this baseline soil data will help us. Like in these soils where we see really high levels of phosphorus, what is our plant communities that are coming up out there without seeding, or even after seeding? Are we seeing more exotics than we're seeing in these other areas where we have lower levels of phosphorus? Another trend that we see with restoration is these soils that have higher phosphorus they become really grass dominant instead of having a mix of grass and forbs that we're seeing in soils that have lower levels of phosphorus. So I would say what is most compelling for us in this process is with this baseline soil data, we can really see the impact of that on the landscape. We've got 560 acres of prairie to restore, and having this really fine scale soil monitoring to begin with, and then seeing how that impacts the soil community, I think is really great. One thing that is going to be kind of tailored, the planting to the soil data, is really moisture levels, really tailoring that seed mix to how wet the soils are. And particularly if we're able to keep water on the surface for longer by kind of trying to plug up some of those ditches that are draining those wetlands, that are draining those wet prairies down in the floodplain. And keeping them wetter for longer, we'll want to tailor our seed mix so that we're putting wet prairie species where wet prairie is going to be, and upland prairie species where upland prairie is going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And, sometimes an issue we have in Northwest Arkansas is oftentimes we might have kind of shallow soils, and the kind of buildup of nutrients in our region can make those soils, susceptible if they're lost through erosion. That's every particle of soil lost. If it's high in phosphorus, that's especially damaging to the water. And so, identifying those kind of specific properties or problems throughout the property, I think definitely will be very interesting to see from this project, and what you guys see in the long term as you continue this over the years. Absolutely. We have another question from the audience, and I guess again for Annie, maybe this one is best suited for you. Someone asked, is there anything I can take from the findings or methods used in this large-scale project to improve my local ecosystem, even if it's at like a much smaller scale? Maybe this person means like what they could do on their own property. Or maybe does the IRWP work with individual homeowners to kind of tailor their property to be more eco-friendly or less damaging?
Yes, absolutely, we do. If you live in the Illinois River Watershed, you can go to our website or give us a call, and we do landowner visits. So we'll come out to your property.
Wow.
We create custom conservation plans. So we kind of think through all of your natural resources concerns and provide recommendations. But really the best thing we can do at a small scale, even in our little urban lots, is just go native. To choose native plants over exotics in our landscaping makes a huge difference, not just on food for pollinators and wildlife, but in that soil properties. Anything we can do to get those deep-rooted prairie species. Bermuda grass has 6-inch deep roots, and that is just basically, it's not much better than just concrete or gravel. It's not allowing for much infiltration. It's generating a lot of runoff. We have to fertilize, we have to water our lawns, we have to mow them constantly. Replacing some of that lawn with native prairie species, if we could all just do a little bit of that, we would see this cascade effect on all wildlife, on pollinators, on our mammals. But then we would start to see the impact of getting that stormwater back into the soil, reducing runoff. With that runoff is all of that, the pollution from our urban environments, but it also just gets into our channels and just erodes away our creeks and streams, and then generates more nutrient pollution in our streams. So that would be my number one recommendation, is just to choose native plants. We have so many beautiful native plants too that provide year-round interest. And so that is my suggestion. But definitely reach out to us if you live in the watershed. If not, find your local watershed organization, Beaver Watershed Alliance, H2 Ozarks, and reach out to them, and they can help support you as well.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, a lot of the times with environmental work that our different organizations do, it's all about trying to get people to be aware that we will help them, because that is the first step in actually us being able to engage with people and do meaningful work with them. So I think it's really great to be able to, let people know that IRWP has things to offer them. All they have to do is ask. Well, the last question that we have from the audience is actually, I guess, directed at me. Someone asked, what was my favorite part of getting to facilitate interviews with so many great organizers and their people? And I would just answer that by, I would say for myself, this has been very valuable because you all have different jobs, you work for different organizations, you have different goals, but I think opportunities like this really highlight that having people with different goals and different organizations, kind of what makes a project like this as successful as possible. And so that's my favorite part, is seeing how each of you can pretty much complement each other in this project and increase, how effective it is, how many people it can impact. So to the audience member that asked that question, I would say that has been my favorite part of getting to do these interviews with all of you. So thank you again for being a part of that, certainly. So for today, that's all the time that we have for this Q&A session. So I do, again, want to say thank you to Susan and Annie and Dr. Brye for providing their expertise. I also want to thank the USDA NRCS for the funding that made this virtual field trip project possible, and to all of our colleagues at the University of Arkansas Division of Agriculture for their help in organizing and recording and reaching out to the audience that's participated today, and will then post this recorded virtual field trip on the UADA YouTube channel, where people can then view it for essentially forever. To the audience, I also want to thank you for joining us today for this virtual field trip. And I want to especially point out that I would like you to be on the lookout for our future emails, constant contact, and social media posts from University of Arkansas Extension about our upcoming virtual field trip series that all focus on various projects in Arkansas soil and water conservation efforts. So with that, again, thank you all, and we'll see you next time at the Soil and Water Conservation Virtual Field Trip Series.
Thank you for joining us for the Soil and Water Conservation Virtual Field Trip. This broadcast is funded by NRCS and produced by the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture Cooperative Extension Service.